"I ain't broken, sir, but I can clean your barn," native woman said. What Cowboy did next changed. The sun was just beginning to climb above the hills when the young woman appeared on the horizon. Her steps were steady and her eyes, dark and full of determination, scanned the wide expanse of the ranch. Dust rose gently from the dry earth with each footfall, catching the golden light and swirling around her boots. She carried nothing but a small bundle wrapped in cloth, slung over her shoulder, and a quiet strength that seemed to follow her with every step. The wind tugged at the strands of her long hair, and she brushed them behind her ears, as if readying herself for the challenge she knew awaited her. The ranch spread out before her like a patchwork quilt of browns and yellows, dotted with grazing horses and a few cows wandering aimlessly. A wooden fence lined the property, rough-hewn and worn from years of exposure to wind, sun, and rain. In the distance, the barn rose like a sentinel, its red paint faded, its doors slightly askew, and a sense of silence surrounding it. The air smelled of hay, dry soil, and a hint of smoke from a distant chimney. This was no small task, and she felt it deep in her bones. Yet she also felt something else, a surge of courage that refused to let doubt slow her down. She walked along the fence line until she reached the main path leading to the barn. Her eyes met the cowboy's before he had fully noticed her. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that carried the lines of years spent under the sun. His hat was pulled low, shielding his eyes, but not his curiosity. He watched her approach, one brow raised in surprise, and a faint frown forming on his lips. It was not every day that someone came to his ranch looking for work, and certainly not like this, a young native woman moving with confidence, yet carrying no tools or supplies beyond the small bundle she had brought. "I ain't broken, sir, but I can clean your barn," she said, her voice steady, carrying over the distance between them. There was no hesitation, no pleading in her tone, just a simple, honest statement of her intent. The cowboy blinked. He had heard many excuses and many requests for work in his time, but this was different. Her words were neither weak nor timid. They were strong, clear, and impossible to ignore. He wanted to ask her why she thought she could handle the work, but something in her gaze, fierce yet calm, made him pause. She did not look like someone who needed pity, nor like someone who would be satisfied with charity. She looked capable. "Clean my barn?" he said slowly, as if testing the sound of the words. His voice carried a mixture of skepticism and curiosity. "That's a lot of work for one person, especially with all that hay and the animals." She smiled faintly but did not falter. "I've done it before," she said simply. "I know what to do. I'll work as long as you need me to. I don't mind hard work." Her words were plain, but her tone had weight. She was offering more than help. She was offering determination and skill. The cowboy hesitated. He had seen many people come and go, most of them unable to handle the physical labor or the long hours under the sun. Most gave up before finishing the first task. Yet here was someone who seemed different. She stood with her shoulders squared, her chin up, and a quiet fire in her eyes that he could not dismiss. "All right," he said finally, scratching the back of his neck. "If you think you can do it, you can start today." His voice was rough, but there was a hint of respect hidden beneath it. Her face lit up with a subtle but genuine smile. Without another word, she set down her bundle and rolled up her sleeves. She examined the barn, noting the broken boards, the scattered hay, and the dust that seemed to settle in every corner. Her hands were steady and her movements sure, as if she had been doing this work for years. And maybe she had. She grabbed a broom left near the barn entrance and began sweeping the floor, dust rising in gentle clouds around her. The cowboy leaned against the doorway, watching her. He had expected her to struggle, perhaps even complain, but she moved with purpose and rhythm, tackling the chores one by one. She lifted old crates, sorted through worn tools, and even coaxed the animals to settle down with soft words and calm gestures. The barn slowly began to transform from a place of chaos to a space of order. The air felt lighter, the smell of fresh hay replacing the stale dust. As she worked, she talked quietly to herself, narrating the steps she was taking, as if sharing the process with someone who could understand. Sweep this corner first, then stack the hay neatly. The mules need fresh water. The doors need tightening. Her voice was low but steady, filled with an unspoken pride in her labor. She did not complain, she did not rush, she simply worked. The cowboy found himself shifting on his feet, caught between admiration and disbelief. He had been wrong to underestimate her. Her hands, though delicate-looking at first, moved with surprising strength and precision. Her movements were deliberate, not hurried, and each task she completed seemed to carry a sense of pride and accomplishment. He realized that this woman was not asking for charity or pity. She was claiming her place through her actions. By midday, the sun had climbed high in the sky, beating down on the barn and the surrounding fields. The young woman paused for a moment to wipe the sweat from her brow, her face glistening but resolute. She looked around at the work she had done so far. The floor was swept clean, the animals were calmer, and the hay was stacked in neat piles. It was not perfect, but it was a start. The cowboy approached, his hat in hand, and nodded slowly. "You've got skill," he said, the words sounding strange even to his own ears. Not many people could handle this alone. "I told you, sir," she said with a small grin. "I ain't broken. I can do what needs doing if I'm given the chance." Her words carried no arrogance, only truth. He realized then that there was something important in her statement, something beyond the act of cleaning a barn. She was not asking for help or sympathy. She was proving herself through her work, showing that capability and courage were not always tied to appearance or background. In that moment, the cowboy felt a quiet respect grow inside him, a respect that he had not felt for anyone in a long time. The rest of the afternoon passed in a steady rhythm. She continued working, and he continued observing, sometimes offering guidance, sometimes just letting her figure things out. The barn gradually transformed, each task completed a testament to her determination and skill. The air inside seemed lighter, the space brighter, and even the animals moved more comfortably around her. By the time the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the barn looked almost new. The cowboy stepped inside and ran his hand along a neatly stacked pile of hay. It was orderly, clean, and functional, something he had not seen in a long time. He turned to look at her, and for the first time he saw her not as a visitor or a stranger, but as someone capable, strong, and worthy of trust. "Ah." She smiled at him, a quiet acknowledgement of their unspoken understanding. No words were needed beyond what had already been said and done. She had proven herself through her work, and he had learned something about respect, capability, and courage. The young woman gathered her things as the first stars began to appear in the sky. She had arrived as a stranger, offering to clean a barn, and in the process, she had begun to change the way the cowboy saw the world, and perhaps even himself. The air carried a sense of possibility, of trust beginning to grow where doubt had once stood. As she walked toward the fence, ready to leave for the evening, the cowboy tipped his hat. "I didn't expect this," he said softly, a hint of a smile touching his lips. I told you, sir, she replied simply, her voice calm and steady. I ain't broken. I can do what needs doing. And for the first time, he truly believed her. The next morning, the sun rose slowly over the hills, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. The ranch was quiet except for the occasional cluck of chickens or lowing of cows. The young native woman returned, her small bundle in hand, ready to continue the work she had begun the day before. The cowboy was already outside, leaning against the fence, watching the horizon. When he saw her approach, he straightened and tipped his hat slightly. "Back so soon?" he asked, his voice carrying both surprise and curiosity. "Yes, sir," she said, her tone polite but firm. "There's more work to do, and I'm ready." He paused, studying her for a moment. Most people would have needed a rest, or at least some time to complain. Yet she had returned with the same determination she had shown the day before. He nodded slowly, almost reluctantly. "All right, then. Let's see what you can do." She smiled faintly and went straight to the barn, her eyes scanning the space for tasks. There were loose boards to fix, tools to organize, and the animals to tend. She did not rush. Instead, she moved with purpose, checking each area carefully. Every step she took seemed deliberate, every motion precise. The cowboy followed at a distance, curious to see how she handled the work when no one was watching closely. She started with the boards that had come loose during the previous day's windstorm. Kneeling down, she measured, adjusted, and hammered them back into place. Her hands were steady, and her movements confident, as though she had done this 1,000 times before. The sound of the hammer echoed softly in the barn, mingling with the occasional whinny of the horses and the low murmur of cows. As she worked, the cowboy noticed small details he had never paid attention to before. She made sure the water troughs were full. The hay was stacked in a way that would stay dry even if it rained, and the animals had space to move comfortably. Each action, simple on the surface, showed an understanding and care for the ranch he had never seen from anyone else. By midday, the sun was high and strong, and the air was thick with heat. The cowboy called out, "You want some water?" "I'll take a drink in a moment, sir," she replied, wiping the sweat from her brow. "I want to finish fixing these boards first." Her dedication surprised him. Most people would have sat down in the shade, complaining about the heat or the hard work, but she kept going, her focus unwavering. He felt a mixture of admiration and discomfort. He realized he had underestimated her, and maybe he had underestimated himself too. He had assumed that someone like her would need help or guidance every step of the way. But here she was, proving him wrong with every task she completed. As she finished with the boards, she moved on to the tools. Many of them were scattered across the barn, some rusty, some broken, and some just misplaced. She cleaned each one carefully, checking for damage, sharpening blades where needed, and organizing everything neatly on the shelves. The cowboy watched silently. He had always kept the barn somewhat organized, but her methodical approach made him see that there was a better, more efficient way to do things. When she finally paused for a drink of water, he offered a small smile. "You're good at this," he said. "Better than I thought." She returned his smile but didn't boast. "I just know how to work, sir. Hard work teaches you things you can't learn any other way." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the sounds of the ranch. There was a quiet respect growing between them, built not on words, but on actions. The cowboy realized that respect had been missing from his ranch for a long time. He had been so used to doing everything himself that he had forgotten what it meant to trust someone else's hands. After a short break, she moved on to the animals. The horses needed grooming, and she approached them with a calm confidence, that immediately put the animals at ease. She ran her hands along their coats, brushing away dust and dirt, whispering soft words that seemed to soothe even the most restless. The cows were next, and she made sure each had clean water and fresh hay. Even the chickens received attention, their coops cleaned and fresh feed scattered in neat piles. The cowboy couldn't help but notice the transformation in the barn. Where there had been disorder, there was now a sense of order and peace. The animals were calmer, the tools were organized, and the barn itself felt alive with energy. It was as if her presence had brought balance to a place that had been quiet, almost stagnant, for too long. As the day wore on, they spoke more than they had the day before. She told him stories of her life, of growing up in a small village, learning the ways of her people and the lessons she had learned from her elders. Her voice was gentle, yet there was strength in every word. The cowboy listened, intrigued by her stories, and found himself opening up in return. He spoke of his own struggles, the challenges of running a ranch, and the loneliness that often came with the work. They discovered shared values. Both understood the importance of hard work, honesty, and respect for others. Yet they also confronted differences. She spoke of her culture and the hardships her people had faced, while he admitted to his own prejudices and limited understanding. Their conversations were honest, sometimes uncomfortable, but always respectful. Each word, each shared experience brought them closer. As evening approached, clouds began to gather in the sky. A storm was coming, and the cowboy could see it in the darkening horizon. He worried for the animals in the barn, but she seemed unafraid. "We can handle it," she said calmly. "We'll make sure everything is safe before the rain comes." Together, they worked quickly but carefully. She secured the loose doors, reinforced the fences, and made sure the animals were sheltered. The cowboy followed her instructions, realizing that she had a plan and that her knowledge was practical and reliable. By the time the first drops of rain began to fall, the barn and animals were safe, and the storm could do no real damage. The cowboy stood back, watching her work, and felt a deep respect growing inside him. He had never met someone so capable, so fearless, and so dedicated. And yet it was not just her strength that impressed him. It was her humility, her willingness to do what needed to be done without seeking praise or recognition. When the storm passed and the sky cleared to reveal a bright moon rising over the hills, they stood together in the barn. The air smelled fresh, washed clean by the rain, and the animals moved quietly in their shelters. The cowboy finally spoke, his voice softer than before. "I didn't think anyone could handle this place like you do." She smiled, not with pride, but with quiet confidence. "I told you, sir. I ain't broken. I can do what needs doing if I'm given the chance." The cowboy nodded, feeling a sense of understanding and respect that went beyond words. He realized that the young woman had not only helped him with his barn and animals, but it also opened his eyes to something deeper. She had shown him the value of trust, the importance of respect, and the strength that comes from determination and skill. As they finished their work and prepared for the night, he offered her a place to rest in the small cabin near the barn. She hesitated, then accepted, understanding that this was not just an offer of shelter, but an acknowledgement of her abilities and worth. They shared a quiet dinner, talking about small things, the weather, the next day's tasks, and the animals' needs. It was ordinary, yet it felt important, as if this simple connection marked the beginning of a new understanding between them. When the night grew quiet and the stars shone brightly above the ranch, the cowboy watched her rest. He thought about how much he had underestimated her and how wrong he had been to judge someone by appearance or rumor. She had arrived with nothing but determination and had proven that courage, skill, and humility could accomplish more than anyone expected. He felt a quiet sense of gratitude, not just for the help she had given, but for the lesson she had taught him. The barn was cleaner, the animals were cared for, and the work was done. But more than that, his perspective had changed. He now saw the value of respect, trust, and understanding, and he knew that his ranch, his work, and perhaps even his life would never be the same again. And the young woman? She rested with satisfaction, knowing she had not only worked hard, but had also begun to earn respect and trust. Her journey had just begun, but already she had made a mark, quiet, strong, and undeniable. The days that followed felt different on the ranch. The young woman arrived each morning with the same quiet determination, ready to work, while the cowboy watched, sometimes helping, sometimes just observing. The barn was no longer just a place of chores. It had become a space where respect and trust were quietly growing. She moved through the ranch with a careful rhythm. She fed the animals, swept the barn, repaired fences, and carried water without complaint. Each task, though ordinary, became an act of skill and patience. The cowboy noticed how naturally she worked, and he began to feel a sense of relief. For years he had managed everything alone, often exhausted and frustrated. Now, with her help, he could see the ranch running more smoothly than it had in a long time. As she worked, she continued to tell stories about her life and her people. She spoke of the land where she grew up, of the customs her family had taught her, and the lessons she had learned about patience, hard work, and respect. The cowboy listened, sometimes with curiosity, sometimes with humility. He realized that her knowledge went far beyond cleaning barns or caring for animals. It was wisdom rooted in experience and culture. At first, he had been skeptical, unsure if she could handle the demands of the ranch. But day by day, he saw her determination and competence. She never asked for praise, never sought attention, and never hesitated to step in when work needed to be done. She showed him that strength came in many forms, not just the ability to lift heavy objects or ride a horse, but also in focus, intelligence, and perseverance. One afternoon, while she repaired a broken fence, a group of neighboring ranchers rode by. They slowed as they approached, curious about the young woman working diligently under the sun. Some exchanged skeptical glances, whispering among themselves. One of them, a man with a wide-brimmed hat, called out, "That barn's no place for a woman alone. You sure you're up for it?" The cowboy's jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of attitude before, and he did not like it. "She's doing fine," he called back firmly. "If anyone can handle it, it's her." The neighbors hesitated, then rode on, muttering under their breath. The young woman did not look up, continuing her work with quiet determination. She did not need their approval. She had already proven her ability to herself, and now, with the cowboy's support, she had proven it to someone who truly mattered. As the week went on, the cowboy began to open up more to her. He shared stories of the ranch's past, of the struggles he had faced alone, and the mistakes he had made trying to do everything himself. The young woman listened, offering gentle advice and thoughtful questions, never judging, only guiding. In return, he began to see her as more than just a worker. She was someone whose insight and presence had a real impact on the life of the ranch. Their bond grew quietly, like a plant reaching for sunlight. They worked together, side by side, but also shared small moments of understanding. When the horses were restless, they would calm them together. When the animals needed extra care, they would handle it in perfect coordination. Even the smallest task became a moment of teamwork, trust, and mutual respect. One evening, after a long day of work, the cowboy and the young woman sat outside the barn. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, and the air was cool and calm. They ate a simple meal of bread, cheese, and fresh vegetables from the garden. She spoke softly of her dreams and the people she cared about back home, and he shared memories of his childhood and the lessons he had learned on the ranch. "I never thought someone could come here and change how I see things," he admitted, his voice low. "You've made me realize that strength isn't just about doing everything alone. It's about knowing when to trust, when to listen, and when to learn." She smiled, a gentle warmth in her eyes. "I'm glad you see it that way, sir. We all have strengths. Some are easy to see, some take time to notice. Hard work teaches us which is which." The cowboy nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He realized that he had been too proud for too long, believing that asking for help was weakness. But watching her, seeing her dedication and skill, he understood that true strength often comes from working together and respecting the abilities of others. The days passed and the bond between them grew stronger. The barn was now organized, the fences repaired, and the animals healthier and calmer than ever. She had become an essential part of the ranch, not just through her work, but through her presence, her wisdom, and her quiet strength. One afternoon, a task arose that would test their trust and teamwork. A young horse had become tangled in a broken fence and was frightened, thrashing and kicking. The cowboy approached first, trying to calm it, but the animal was too scared. The young woman stepped forward, calmly, speaking in soft, soothing tones. She moved with careful precision, guiding the horse gently while the cowboy held the fence steady. Together they worked in perfect coordination, and eventually the horse was free, its eyes wide but calm. The cowboy looked at her with admiration. "I don't know how you stayed so calm," he said. She shrugged slightly, her expression serious but gentle. "Panicking doesn't help anyone, sir. You just have to be patient and steady." Animals feel fear, and they need someone to be stronger than that fear. That day he realized that her strength was not just physical. It was patience, courage, and understanding, a strength that could calm chaos and bring order where there had been fear. He had learned this from watching her, but he also felt it in himself, as if her example had inspired him to become a better rancher and a better person. Over time, other ranchers began to notice the changes on his property. The animals were healthier, the barn cleaner, and the land better maintained. Some came to observe, curious about how this young woman had managed such improvements. The cowboy would simply shrug and smile, letting the work speak for itself. The young woman never boasted, never demanded recognition. She just continued to work, always focused, always calm, always strong. As the sun set each evening, the two of them would often sit together on the porch or near the barn, watching the stars appear. They shared small conversations about life, dreams, and hopes for the future. The cowboy found himself listening more, thinking more, and realizing that life on the ranch was not just about chores or survival. It was about relationships, trust, and understanding the world through the eyes of those who saw it differently. One night, after a particularly long day of work, the young woman looked at the cowboy and said quietly, "I'm not here to change you, sir. I'm just here to do what I can. But sometimes, the people who work hardest also help others see things they couldn't before." He looked at her, feeling the depth of her words. He realized that she was right. She had not only helped with the ranch, but had also changed how he viewed life, work, and respect. He felt gratitude that went beyond words, a feeling that could only be expressed through trust, cooperation, and quiet appreciation. By the end of the week, the barn and ranch were running more smoothly than ever. The young woman had become indispensable, not just because of her work, but because of her wisdom, her calm presence, and her strength of character. The cowboy had learned to rely on her, to listen to her, and to respect her judgment. For her part, she felt a quiet satisfaction. She had not sought recognition or praise, only the chance to do meaningful work. She had proven that she was capable, that she could handle challenges, and that respect earned through action was worth more than any words could express. As the moon rose high over the hills, they stood together in the quiet of the barn. The work was done for the day, but the lessons they had learned from each other were lasting. The young woman had shown him strength in ways he had never expected, and he had begun to see that courage, patience, and understanding could change not just a barn or a ranch, but a person's heart. The cowboy finally spoke, his voice soft but steady. "I've been running this ranch alone for years, thinking I could do it all. You've shown me that strength isn't just about doing things alone. It's about knowing who you can trust and learning from them." She smiled, a quiet warmth in her expression. "That's all I've ever wanted, sir, to do what needs doing, and to help where I can." And in that moment, under the wide-open sky and the soft glow of the moon, they both understood something important. Strength, respect, and trust could grow quietly, steadily, and without fanfare. It was built through actions, patience, and understanding. And sometimes it could come from the most unexpected places. The morning started like any other, with sunlight spilling over the hills and the quiet sounds of animals moving around the ranch. The young woman had been up early, feeding the chickens and checking the water troughs, while the cowboy inspected the fences and the barns. Everything seemed peaceful, almost ordinary, but the calm would not last. As the day progressed, dark clouds began rolling in from the west, bringing with them a sudden shift in the air. The wind picked up, rustling the trees and sending dust swirling across the fields. The cowboy frowned, noticing the weather change, and hurried to secure the animals. The young woman noticed his concern and immediately offered help. "Sir, we need to make sure the animals are safe before the storm hits," she said, her voice calm but urgent. He nodded, grateful for her quick thinking. "You're right. Let's get started." They worked side by side, moving quickly but carefully. The young woman guided the horses into a sheltered part of the barn, while the cowboy reinforced the fences around the cows and goats. The wind was growing stronger, rattling the barn doors and shaking the trees. Rain began to fall in heavy sheets, soaking the ground and turning the dirt paths into slippery mud. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed from the barn. A large stack of hay had toppled over, narrowly missing one of the horses. The cowboy ran toward the barn, heart pounding, only to see the young woman already lifting the hay and moving it to a safe corner. Her hands were steady, her movements precise, even as the rain soaked her clothes and plastered her hair to her face. "You're incredible," the cowboy shouted over the storm, astonished at her composure. "How do you stay so calm in all this?" She looked at him briefly, a small, confident smile on her face. "Panicking doesn't help anyone, sir. We have work to do, and we'll finish it, one step at a time." Her words carried a quiet power, and the cowboy realized that she had a strength far beyond physical ability. It was patience, courage, and determination, the kind of strength that kept people steady when chaos surrounded them. Together they continued to secure the barn and the animals, making sure everything was in its proper place. The storm raged on, rain lashing against the wooden roof, lightning flashing across the darkened sky, and thunder shaking the earth beneath them. At one point, a tree branch broke off and crashed near the fence, scaring the animals. The cowboy grabbed ropes and guided the cows to safety, while the young woman calmed the frightened horses, her voice steady and soothing. The two of them worked in perfect coordination, moving efficiently despite the chaos. After what felt like hours, the worst of the storm passed, The rain slowed, the wind softened, and the sun began to peek through the clouds. They stood in the barn, soaked and exhausted, looking around at the aftermath. The fences were intact, the animals were safe, and the barn had survived the storm. The cowboy let out a deep breath, feeling a mix of relief and admiration. "I don't know what I would have done without you," he admitted, his voice filled with gratitude. "You handled everything better than I could have imagined." She shook her head, a faint smile on her lips. "We did it together, sir. We worked as a team. That's what matters." He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time, not just as a worker, but as someone capable, wise, and strong in ways he had never known. She had not only helped him save the ranch from the storm, but had also taught him an important lesson. True strength comes from teamwork, trust, and calm determination. The storm left the land soaked and muddy, but it also brought a sense of renewal. The plants looked greener, the air smelled fresh, and the animals seemed calmer, as if they had survived something important. The cowboy and the young woman spent the rest of the afternoon cleaning up the debris, repairing minor damages, and ensuring that every animal was safe and comfortable. During a brief break, they sat under the shelter of the barn, sipping water and catching their breath. The young woman wiped the rain from her face and smiled faintly. "It wasn't easy, sir," she said, "but it showed me something important too. Hard work and staying calm can get you through almost anything." The cowboy nodded, feeling the truth of her words. He realized that he had underestimated the young woman when she first arrived. He had assumed she might struggle with the work, that she might need help or guidance every step of the way. But she had proven him wrong, not just through her skill, but through her courage, patience, and unshakable determination. As they continued their work over the next few days, the cowboy noticed changes in himself. He found himself listening more carefully, trusting her judgment, and appreciating the wisdom she brought to even the smallest tasks. Their bond had grown stronger, and the ranch felt more alive than it had in years. The young woman had not only helped with the physical work, but she had also taught him about patience, teamwork, and respect. One morning, as they repaired a damaged fence near the edge of the property, the cowboy spoke quietly, almost to himself. "You've changed how I see this ranch, and maybe how I see the world." She looked at him, her eyes steady. "That's all I hope for, sir. We all learn from each other, even in ways we don't expect. Hard work and respect can teach lessons that words never could." He smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the sun. He realized that she had not only earned his trust, but had also inspired him to be better, to work harder, and to see value in cooperation and understanding. The following week brought new challenges. A young calf had fallen ill, and the cowboy was worried about its survival. The young woman stepped forward immediately, examining the calf carefully, giving it water and keeping it warm. She instructed the cowboy on how to care for it, guiding him patiently through the process. Slowly, with their combined efforts, the calf began to recover. Through this, the cowboy saw the depth of her knowledge and her gentle authority. She had a way of seeing problems clearly and solving them with care and attention. He realized that she was not just someone who could clean a barn or feed animals. She was a problem solver, a steady hand in difficult times, and someone he could rely on completely. One evening, after a long day of tending to the animals and repairing fences, they sat together on the porch. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the fields, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of the evening. Crickets, distant horses, and the gentle rustle of leaves. The cowboy looked at her, feeling a sense of gratitude and admiration he had never expected to feel. "I've been running this ranch alone for so long," he said, his voice quiet. I didn't realize how much I needed help and how much I could learn from someone else. She smiled softly. We all need help, sir. Sometimes we just don't see it until someone shows us the way. It's not weakness to accept help. It's strength to work together and learn from each other. The cowboy nodded, understanding the depth of her words. He had always thought that strength meant doing everything himself, carrying every burden alone. But she had shown him that true strength could come from cooperation, trust, and respect. She had faced the storm, the injured animals, and the challenges of the ranch with courage and calm, and he had learned from her example. That night, as the stars appeared in the clear sky, he looked at the young woman and realized how much their lives had changed. She had arrived with nothing but determination and a willingness to work, and she had not only helped him save his ranch, but had also opened his eyes to new ways of seeing the world. He felt a quiet gratitude and a deep respect for her strength, her wisdom, and her courage. The storm, the challenges, and the hard work had transformed more than the ranch. They had transformed him. He understood now that respect, trust, and teamwork were more valuable than pride or independence alone. And he knew that the young woman who had come to clean his barn had left an indelible mark on his life. As they finally rested for the night, the cowboy felt a sense of peace he had not known in years. The barn was safe, the animals were cared for, and the lessons they had learned together would last a lifetime. The young woman smiled quietly to herself, satisfied that she had proven her strength and her ability to make a difference. She had not only survived the challenges, but had also earned respect, trust, and a sense of belonging. And as the moon rose high over the hills, casting a silver light over the ranch, the cowboy and the young woman both understood something important. Strength, courage, and respect were not measured by words or appearances, but by actions, patience, and the ability to face challenges together. The days after the storm were calm, but they carried a new sense of purpose. The ranch, once quiet and a little worn, now felt alive in a way it had never before. The animals moved more comfortably, the barn was clean and orderly, and even the fences seemed stronger, more solid. The young woman continued her work as usual, rising with the sun, checking the animals, and tending to the land. But something had shifted. Not just in the ranch, but in the cowboy himself. He moved differently now, with a lighter step and a more open expression. He no longer approached the ranch as a burden to carry alone, but as a place where shared effort could create real results. Watching the young woman work had changed him, showing him that respect, trust, and teamwork were far more valuable than pride or independence. He realized he had underestimated the power of collaboration and the strength of someone willing to act with skill, patience, and determination. One morning, as the two of them repaired a fence along the pasture, the cowboy spoke quietly, almost to himself. "You've done more than clean the barn or feed the animals," he said. "You've shown me how to see the ranch, and maybe even life, in a different way." The young woman paused, resting her hands on the fence, and looked at him with calm eyes. "That's all I hope for, sir. Sometimes people just need to see another way to understand something they've missed before." He nodded, feeling the truth in her words. She had arrived as a stranger with nothing but determination. Yet she had become an essential part of the ranch. Her work had improved not only the physical space, but also the atmosphere, the energy, and the way the cowboy approached each day. He felt gratitude that went beyond words. In the following days, the cowboy began to trust her judgment more fully. He asked for her opinion on how to repair fences, which animals needed extra care, and how to organize the barns for maximum efficiency. She offered guidance, calmly and clearly, never commanding, never insisting, only advising based on experience and careful observation. Slowly, the cowboy realized that listening to her made the ranch run more smoothly, and he began to respect her not just for her labor, but for her mind, her wisdom, and her character. The young woman also began to see changes in herself. The ranch, which had once seemed a place of endless work and challenges, now felt like a place of growth and opportunity. She had earned the cowboy's respect and trust, and in doing so, she had proven to herself that her strength and determination mattered. Each task she completed brought a quiet satisfaction, a sense of pride that came not from recognition, but from the knowledge that her efforts made a real difference. One day, a neighbor came by to visit. He had heard of the young woman's work and had come to see for himself. He watched her move through the barn, tending to the animals with calm authority and confidence. He saw the order she had brought to the space and the careful attention she gave to every task. When he spoke to the cowboy, he said, "I've never seen anyone handle things like that. She's remarkable." The cowboy smiled, feeling a quiet pride. "She is," he said simply. "Ah, she knows what needs to be done and does it better than most I've known. I'm lucky she's here." The young woman did not seek praise, but she acknowledged the compliment with a faint smile. She had learned that respect and trust were more important than applause. Her focus remained on the work, the animals, and the land, but she also recognized that her presence had changed the way people viewed her, and perhaps even themselves. As the weeks went by, the cowboy and the young woman continued their routine, but each day felt richer, fuller, and more meaningful. They shared small conversations, quiet moments of reflection, and practical lessons about the ranch and life itself. The cowboy began to involve her in planning the day's work, trusting her judgment and learning from her decisions. He discovered that strength was not just about physical ability, but also about patience, foresight, and understanding. One afternoon, as they prepared the animals for the coming winter, the cowboy turned to her. "You've taught me more than I ever thought possible," he said. "I came to this ranch thinking I could handle everything myself. You've shown me that sometimes the best strength comes from working with someone you trust." She looked at him, her expression calm but full of meaning. "That's all any of us can do, sir. Work hard, help where we can, and respect each other. Strength grows from that, not from pride or independence alone." Her words sank deep into his mind. He realized that she was right. For years, he had carried the ranch alone, believing that independence was the only path to strength. But she had shown him a better way, a way that combined skill, patience, and mutual respect. He felt a sense of humility and gratitude, understanding that life was richer when shared with someone willing to give their best. As winter approached, the ranch was prepared. The animals were cared for, the barns were secure, and the fences were strong. The cowboy and the young woman worked tirelessly to make sure everything was ready for the cold months ahead. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, talking about life, the work of the day, and the lessons they had learned. Each conversation deepened their understanding of each other, creating a bond that went beyond mere work. One night, as the stars shone brightly over the ranch, the cowboy spoke softly. "You've changed this place, and maybe even me," he said. "I don't know how to thank you." She smiled gently, her eyes reflecting the light of the fire. "You don't need to thank me, sir. I just wanted to do what I could, that's all." But the cowboy knew that her impact went far beyond what she realized. She had brought order, care, and respect to the ranch, but she had also brought something more: hope, understanding, and a reminder that true strength comes from working together and valuing each other's abilities. The young woman had also gained something from the experience. She had proven her strength, her courage, and her skill. She had earned trust and respect, not just from the cowboy, but from the land, the animals, and even the neighboring ranchers. She had shown that determination and patience could overcome doubt, and that respect was earned through action, not words. As winter settled over the ranch, the cowboy looked at the young woman and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had come to see her as more than a worker. She was a partner in maintaining the ranch, a guide in difficult times, and a friend whose wisdom had changed his life. He realized that the ranch was not just stronger physically, but also stronger emotionally and spiritually because of her presence. One snowy evening, as they finished securing the barn for the night, the cowboy turned to her. "You've done more than I ever expected," he said. "You've shown me what it means to trust, to respect, and to work together. I can't imagine this ranch without you now." She smiled, a faint warmth in her expression. "I'm glad I could help, sir. That's all I ever wanted, to do what needed to be done and make a difference where I could." And in that moment, both of them understood something profound. The young woman had come with nothing but determination, willing hands, and a quiet strength. She had cleaned the barn, cared for the animals, and repaired fences, but she had also changed the heart of the cowboy. Through her actions, patience, and courage, she had taught him lessons he would never forget. Lessons about respect, trust, teamwork, and the true meaning of strength. The ranch was safe, the animals were cared for, and the work had been done. But more importantly, the bond between them had grown into something lasting, built on mutual respect, understanding, and shared effort. They had faced challenges, weathered storms, and learned from each other. Together, they had turned a simple act of cleaning a barn into a story of growth, trust, and transformation. As the moon rose high over the snow-covered hills, casting silver light across the ranch, the cowboy and the young woman stood together in front of the barn. The animals were settled for the night, the fences secure, and the barn sturdy and orderly. They looked at each other and smiled, not needing words to express what they had achieved. She had arrived as a stranger, offering only her willingness to work, and she had left an unforgettable mark, not just on the ranch, not just on the animals, but on the cowboy himself. And in turn, he had learned to see strength, courage, and respect in a new light. The story of the barn, the storm, and the hard-working young woman became a quiet legend in the area. But for the cowboy and the young woman, it was more than that. It was a reminder that determination, trust, and mutual respect could change lives in ways that no one could predict. And as they looked up at the stars standing side by side in the quiet of the ranch, they both knew that they had discovered something rare and valuable: the true power of work done with heart, courage, and respect for one another.